I've heard that narrative before in Africa, especially, where people would tell you, especially like when you're going. When I was coming to Europe, people would pull me to the side and be like, make sure you get yourself a white woman, that type of a thing. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like there are certain people who see that as an achievement.
That's the only thing in their mind when that happens.
I am an African.
Nathan actually thought of this idea of us having reviews of books of very famous, or not really famous and the not so famous Pan-African books and literature, and just having a review of them and seeing what we think about them.
The book is Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks. Now, this book, as you can, I don't know if you can tell, but when I got it, it was like proper brand new. But after arguing and fighting with the book, it's like a little bit more worn out.
That shows it.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Shows you read it.
Exactly. And I mean, because it was really a lot of wrestling with the book. And before I start, I think it's necessary for one to actually give a disclaimer, because typically when people are talking about things like black, white, there is a typical assumption to sort of believe that the points that are going to be stated or the ideas are anti-white. So I just want to give that disclaimer to simply state that this episode or this book isn't necessarily a anti-white book, and I think there's some people who've sort of hijacked the author and also the book to sort of represent this attitude of like, sort of pointing the woes of the world solely on white people. And I just want to offer that disclaimer that this is actually not the case. And I think this book, as the name kind of suggests in a way, is actually a challenge for black people or people, African people, typically for African people is what the central idea of this book is, sort of stopping black people or African people or people that come from former colonies typically to stop and ask themselves, why am I doing the things that I do? Am I living my authentic life, or am I living my life authentically, or am I performing for a system that was never built for me? So why am I doing the things that I do? Why do I dress the way I do? Why do I talk the way I do? Why is that a how can I say a expression of who I am, or has that been hijacked and influenced? Because, for example, me and you, we come from Zambia, right? And in Zambia, one would argue, especially during the time that we're studying or we're growing up, there was a lot of things that were still kind of like remnants of the colonial system. An example would be you were not allowed to speak your own language in school, right? And it was called vernacular. You weren't allowed to. There was a certain way that you're supposed to wear. You had to have your hair. It had to be cut. It had to be this. There's a certain way that you had to. Exactly. There was a certain way in which you had to be, and a lot of that, as Frantz Fanon claims, is sort of pushing you to be more like what the colonial ideal was, which was this idea of whiteness, right? So like something as simple as telling yourself, or the simple fact of not being allowed to speak your own local language in school, right? What he would say is that it how can I say this, it sort of tells you that in order for you to make it in this world, you have to adopt like something from a colonial system. Like you have to speak their language. You have to be more like them in order to succeed. You cannot succeed in this world simply focusing on simply with your culture and your language and that sort of a concept. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm looking at his bio and his background. He's someone from the African diaspora. So I'm sure he's from the African diaspora. He was born in 1961, and that decade was a decade of Africa in terms of independence. In 1960, 17, at least 17 countries or so got independent. He he has links to the sort of French Caribbean colony because he was born in Martinique.
Martinique.
Yeah, he was born in Martinique, and I think also the fact that he lived in, I think he lived in the United States. He died in the United States in Maryland. He's got I say African diaspora because I'm just referring to everyone who is outside the continent of Africa, so including the Caribbeans.
Right.
He speaks of that because I think he's also living in a context where there is a lot of, this is a majority white countries, for example, like the United States, and this idea of like making yourself palatable for white people. And I've not only heard it with him, but also just in other studies, like so there's this the study of studying. I forgot the word. I think it's ontology, right?
Ontology. Yeah, he uses that
Ontology,
word
right?
quite a lot.
The study of studying, for example, like the center of the world is a white one. It is a Western or global North rather perspective. Almost like when I saw this thing about this content creator. I forgot his name, but he was talking about the former First Lady of Ivory Coast. Her name was Therese Houphouët-Boigny, the wife of President Félix Houphouët-Boigny. And
Cool name.
when she went to visit John F. Kennedy, American press labeled her the Jackie Kennedy of Africa because of how fashionable she was. But then that's an easy thing that we just ignore. Why? Like, you can say it's about perspectives, but at the same time, many of us sort of try and translate and accommodate ourselves with what the West thinks. Like, how do you say Shima in English? There is none. It's not. You know what I mean? Yeah, you don't have to give me an English description of your traditional food for it to be sellable internationally. And I think the Japanese now, it's like a cool thing. Like, if you don't know what kimchi is, then like, what's wrong with you? Like, hello, but like, somehow I have to explain African food in white terms, like, mahogany worms. No, it's not mahogany worms. We have the local names for it. In Zambia, it's Vinkuvala.
Is that Vinkuvala? Oh, okay. It sounds better than it. That sounds. That sounds way more palatable than Vinkuvala.
Palatable.
Anyways,
because it's sorry.
Sorry.
That's what I'm saying. You have to. I see it not only in the way you like dress and the way you talk and your mannerisms, but also in things like food and things that don't have an equivalent in most cases. Are often forced to have some kind of equivalent or reference point. Like even when you say superstars, you have to say, for you to explain this to a wider audience, even among Africans, you have to say, Makitu is the Jay-Z of Zambia. Like, why can't you say Jay-Z? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of, that's where I'm meeting him on this, because I think Africans, for a long time, you have to always explain everything. Over-explain everything and find equivalents for people to understand what you're trying to say, But go ahead. That's just
I think you're touching on some great points that I think there is in almost everything that we do, in almost every facet of life, essentially that we have, like when you go to work, when you go to, there is especially as a person and I think he uses these examples mainly of people that have moved to Europe or other Western countries. And I think an example he gives is like somebody that, lived in France and then, goes back to goes back to not Martinique, but I forget the French island off the top of my head. But this person goes back to this former French colony, and now he doesn't even know his culture anymore, and he speaks and he overemphasizes the way he speaks French, in an attempt to quote unquote achieve the highest value, which is whiteness. So like the idea is that colonialism sort of hijacked the African mind, and it changed. And Yep, good.
It's not ontology, it's epistemology.
Oh,
In my
okay,
head, I had
okay, yeah.
epidemiology, but actually it's epistemology.
But he does use
study
the
of
word
knowledge.
ontology quite a lot. Yeah.
The ontology is the
so
study of being, like
being right, yeah,
there's the other one is the
and
study
that's
of
what.
like knowledge and understanding.
Yeah. And so he talks about somebody that like moves from France, and then all of a sudden spends so much time and effort trying to speak French, even better than the French person, and has to sort of and when he goes back to his hometown, he sort of speaks. He forgets about his culture and sort of looks down on his culture in an attempt to become white. Now there are two things sort of happen when you are reading, when he's talking about this thing where it's like in your different areas of life. He talks about relationships as well, where he talks about from the perspective of a African and a black woman with a white man, and a white man and a black man with a white woman. And he talks about how, like, for a lot of people, now I don't know if this is where maybe you'd like to jump in. He says it's important for black people to sort of also ask themselves those, like, these questions, even in those circumstances. Like, why am I having a relationship with a white person? Is it because I genuinely love this person? Because from his or am I trying to escape my Africanness, right? And for him, he says his definition is that if there is, when it comes to love, if you're doing it because of an economic or because of trying to escape that Africanness, then it ceases to be love. Then it's not love at all, right? And he says that's kind of like problematic. And two thoughts sort of like pop up. I think one thought is that is Frantz Fanon trying to tell us that, oh, we can't do these things? Like, oh, wouldn't it be sensible? I mean, I'm a person that lives in Europe. I'm learning the language. Is that is it that we should stop learning the language? Is it that we should? But I think that's not what he's pointing at. Like with Frantz Fanon, what he's trying to say is essentially that you again ask yourself, why am I learning this language? Is it because I want to get along with people, I want to understand people, I want to speak with people, or am I actually trying to achieve that colonial mindset of trying to be the white man? And for him, he says that is a paradox in of itself, because you're trying to be accepted by the same system that defines you as less than.
So he's basically saying that marrying someone from the former colonizer is you trying to be accepted.
No, he says there are people who are like that, and that thought can exist.
Yeah. Okay. So how about, in what sense can you do that without thinking that you're trying to be accepted?
Could you repeat that?
In what sense can you, for example, be in an interracial relationship with someone from a former colonizing country and not be in a situation where you are trying to be accepted or trying to be approved by?
No, that can exist. That exists. I think the thing that he's saying is that I don't know if I'm using this correctly, but the onus is on you. Like, you, unfortunately, because of the history of colonialism, like, you have to you can also choose not to do these things. That's perfectly fine. However, he would say that you would then would then not know if the way you're living is a function of you yourself choosing to live like that, or it's a function of the colonialism that sort of that sort of happened in the past. So the question is, am I as a person, let's just say assume I was with a white person, I would have to ask myself, am I as a person dating this person because I genuinely love them, or am I doing it to escape my Africanness,
Inferiority.
inferiority complex? Thank you for saying that. That one of the things he states actually is that colonialism brought with it inferiority complex on two levels, and the first level is the economic, and the second level is I think I forget the word, but I think maybe on a personal level, that type of a thing. So yeah, so the idea is like, am I actually dating this? So back to the example where it's like I'm dating a white person, right? The question I have to ask myself is, am I dating this person because I genuinely love their character and I definitely love who they are, or am I doing this to step up economically, or am I doing this because of my inferiority complex, to say that dating a white woman is sort of seen as something that's better than an achievement? Exactly. And I'll be very honest. I've met people, and I've heard that narrative before. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that. Right? I've heard that narrative before in Africa, especially, where people would tell you, especially like when you're going. When I was coming to Europe, people would pull me to the side and be like, make sure you get yourself a white woman. That type of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there are certain people who see that as an achievement.
That's the only thing. That's the only thing in their mind when that happens. I think it's
exactly.
I think you have to. I'm not going to try and say post-racial, but I'm going to say you have to be very. I feel like you have to be very case by case with these things, because these are very personal and intimate type of connections that we're talking about. And I've heard of those things before. Like we grew up with these stories. Like when you see a black woman with an older white man in Zambia, in Malawi, you're like, that's the like that's the rumor, right? Then when you see they're the same age, then suddenly the rumors reduce, because the proportionality of like the chances of the power imbalance. Because the traditional assumption is that an older white man comes to Africa, gets a poorer black woman, takes her, gives her a nice, beautiful, strong passport from Europe or America, and then, they have a mixed race baby who is in a very good standard of living, or even one of our own black children who have a much better standard of living than if she had married someone of her same age from the same community. The immediate assumption is economic, right? An economic marriage, like there was a pure, clear ambition, and it almost vilifies these black women to the extent that they're almost considered like quite slanderous. Second class people. And then even on the European side, that's something that Frantz Fanon doesn't talk about. But even on the European side, when you look at the narratives of white men who go to Asia, for example, they are often considered like the rejects. Like I've seen many memes that talked about it, like the rejects of their societies. Either that, or like they're looking for, there's so many stereotypes around it. Either that, or they're looking for women that are supposedly more pliant, more humble, more traditional, as opposed to the highly educated, high achieving European women, which is silly, because it's also the assumption that there is no sort of like working professional women in Africa, that working professional wealthier white man would be pursuing. So. There's so many things there. I feel like there's so many variables and so many things that you intertwine. And then there's obviously the student, that classic student, international student relationship story that many people have also talked about. But at the same time, there is obviously the malign interest that you hear in all of these documentaries when a older Gambian lady goes to the Gambia, which became famous for the beaches filled with younger men that are basically poaching older elderly British women, and basically making a killing out of them getting married and then eventually getting British citizenship and then leaving them. Making money and contributing, sometimes not even leaving them, but using their money and sending it back to their families in Africa. So there's so many, I feel like there's so many variables here. It's very hard to generalize.
No, I mean, I don't think Frantz is sorry to cut you off, but I don't think that the author.
I'm giving it like a modern.
Yeah, yeah.
I know he
No,
wrote
yeah.
this several times.
No, no,
like
no.
several years. You know.
My point is that he's not saying that me when I see a interracial couple, I should basically now sit down and be like, well, what are the using sort of Jordan Peterson, what are the situations happening, what I'm saying? Like you start like, well, are they getting married because of this? No, like that's not for me to do, like that's not my that's not my thing to do. But as a person that is, I think he's sort of painting the not narratives but the potential, I don't want to say hazards, but he's sort of showing you, like sort of drawing up some hazards that potentially could be occurring because of
I feel like
colonial
it's a
traumas.
call. I feel like it's a call to check your conscience when you're going into
Precisely.
Yeah, it's a call to sort of check your conscience.
Check yourself and ask yourself, hey, okay, am I getting, as I said before, am I getting into this relationship? Because as I said, for him, he would say that if you're getting into a relationship for the economic perspective or because of the inferiority complex, then that's not love at all. And I think you gave an example of, these people who look at these white women and then they get married to them and then they essentially leave them once they get the passports and that sort of aspect.
But then but then there's also criticism from their side, as I mentioned. They are often like these white guys are often looked down on as like like where.
Oh, because of I think it's called the passport bros. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also, I feel like, aside from those stereotypes, both from the side of stereotypes against the so-called, and we have only talked about the white man and the black woman, but also the black man dating the white woman. Yeah. But also some of those stereotypes are also very interesting, because for the black man to date the white woman, then he's a very highly accomplished black man. But for the black woman to date or marry a white man, somehow she's almost like just searching for, just trying to secure the bag. She has almost zero qualifications stereotypically.
That's true. That is true.
Because it's like somehow for a white woman to get a black man's name, you have to be over and above the best type of black that there is. But for a black woman to get a white man's name, it's just get whatever you find. That's the type of stereotype. That's where, at least when people talk about these things, that's the stereotype.